Welcome to ResearchPRO's latest Black Gives Back conversation. I'm Regina Alhassan, CEO of ResearchPRO, and really excited to be here with my latest guest, Ralph Smithers. Ralph, there are a few things that I'll share about Ralph before we get started. Ralph Smithers is the Assistant Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Relations at Encova Insurance. And being the researcher that I am, I stalked the internet just a little bit, trying to find some bio information about Ralph because I forgot to ask for the bio up front. But Ralph, uh, correct me where I'm wrong, and update me where I'm wrong. But board service here in Columbus, Ohio, includes Columbus Urban League, the Ohio Foundation of Independent Colleges, Discovery Special Improvement District, and also former chair for United Way of Central Ohio's Key Club. So, and I would love to come back to Key Club
Yeah, for sure.
as an experience in a affinity group, a giving affinity group. So, Ralph, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your willingness to participate. I am so excited to have you on today and to continue the conversation that started a couple of months ago now when we were both panelists for the Ohio State University's
Yeah, it's hard to believe
advancement.
how fast that time has gone by, but really enjoyed that. And one of the best things about getting to be on a panel is not just the people in the audience, but the people that you're on the panel with. So I really learned a lot from you while we were there and later on. So I'm really happy to have a conversation with you today.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's dive right in. The first question that I always like to start with is what was your introduction to the practice of philanthropy? And I'm curious, did you call it philanthropy?
Yeah, so I don't think I called it philanthropy, but I think for a lot of people, especially people of color, I think for me it was probably at church, and not just watching the collection plate go by, but even watching my parents when there were higher level needs that the church had, building fund or something like that, watching them get more involved in the strategy and the writing of I don't know how large the checks were, but more than the change that the rest of us were
Yeah.
tossing in the plate. So I don't think I thought of that necessarily as philanthropy, but I see philanthropy being something that's a little more intentional and purposeful for a expected outcome versus just a donation where you just throw it in and wish for the best. So that's probably my earliest introduction to it was at church.
Got it. And I love that distinction that you make around philanthropy being a bit more intentional and also being engaged. So there's another level of advocacy that can come along with that. And in some ways, like it's required. It's not just, oh, here's the money and do something with it and hope for the best, as you said. But no, here's money and here's my additional investment, my additional thoughtful investment of time and talent, and the strategy and the advocacy that goes along with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that you are passionate about the latter, to make sure that that time, talent, and treasure is done with intention. And I know that as I have gotten deeper into this, that's what my passion is too. We can make a difference even if it's a small amount over time,
Mm-hmm.
especially.
Mm-hmm. Then the other piece that comes along with that is the generosity. And so, yes, there should be some intentionality at some times, but then just the spirit of generosity, I think that many of us can relate to, especially from a faith-based perspective.
Right. And, of course, in the faith-based environment, there's a lot of talk about, being cheerful and so forth. And you've heard all of that.
Yes.
But I think the real passion comes from, one, being generous, maybe being moved by an opportunity, but even more so to really be passionate about making sure that something gets done, because at the end of the day, we can wait around for someone else and, maybe hope that some big celebrity comes in and does something to make a difference. Or if we start pooling our collective funds, we can do many times more, what that big celebrity might do if we're lucky and they find us. So I like the ownership and control of being intentional.
And so having that background, I'm imagining like since you were a child, so space-based, so something that I would assume you sort of just kind of grew up in. It's always been that way. You've always been engaged, so you've always seen that model set. So I'm curious, and even now, like as a professional, um, sort of in adjacent to the philanthropy space, do you have a favorite philanthropist?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I don't know if I'm going to name a person, but I'm going to name the characteristics that I like or that I aspire to be. I really like philanthropists that remember where they came from. So,
Mhm.
a person starts somewhere and they go off and they become successful, and then they go back to where they started to make sure that other people who had maybe the same potential could potentially be exposed to the same opportunities or better. So maybe a name, if I had to throw a name in to illustrate who I think does that pretty well. LeBron James does that pretty well.
Yeah,
He's out in California now. He's a national figure, but you never forget that he's from Akron in northeastern Ohio, and he's got a school, and he takes care of his community. He takes care of different things here in Ohio, not the least of which is Ohio State. And I think that that's sort of the model that I like is a lot of folks get to a certain point and they roll up the ladder behind them,
yeah.
whereas others get to a certain point and they make sure that they clear the way for someone else to make that next step. They reach instead of kick.
Yeah. The phrase lifting as we climb is what comes
Yes,
to mind when you talk about that.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then also I like that sort of it reminds me of that like think global but act local. So you certainly can grow and you should. And the world is your oyster. But that sense of remaining grounded and attached to where you come from, as you put it, and being and approaching philanthropy in that way, because it can be a bit overwhelming to as a donor to think like, well, where do I support? And especially as you grow your wealth, everyone wants to talk to you. And so then how do you narrow in your focus? And so I love that idea of focusing in on, I'm going to start here, because this is home and I know that there's a need there. I can relate to that and articulate it and have empathy for it in a way that no other donor may be able to, especially a transformational donor like LeBron James. So I love that sort of think global but act local
Yeah, and
approach.
and there's a lot of room in, I will say that, people that have earned that space where they want to go back and invest, I certainly say, hey, do whatever your passion is.
Mm-hmm.
And those passions can take people all over the world. One thing that I talk about with a lot of my colleagues that work in the corporate social responsibility space is that if we pooled all of our resources, we'd still have all the same problems. I mean, there just isn't enough, or else we wouldn't have the issues that are there. So I'm good with people following their passion, but for me, my passion is keeping it local and
Yeah.
trying to have that local influence, change the world.
Yeah. So that's a great segue. So I'd love to spend just a couple of minutes sort of talking about your role in the work that you do, because you're not a fundraiser, you're not a gift officer, but yet you definitely are in the philanthropy space, in the sector, and you're on the corporate side, but you're a nonprofit friend as well. So talk a little bit about your role in corporate and how that touches the nonprofit sector.
Sure. So I should probably talk about how I ended up here because I don't think that was in my plan necessarily. And I do, we can talk about my own philanthropy later, but um, I, I guess I sort of got into this role, I think, originally just by being interested in supporting the community. I served on a number of boards, even before I was in this particular space. I made a personal commitment to try to, keep my calendar full, to try to give back, especially enjoy skill-based volunteering and, serving on boards does that. So I had accumulated a fair amount of experience doing that. And at some point in time, our former CEO asked me to join a board for a small nonprofit he founded. And I sort of found that among a lot of my peers, I had a little more experience just from the board and understanding what other nonprofits do than some of my peers. So I sort of became, maybe if not a go-to person, certainly a
Mhm.
resource. And we had some different changes in the company, especially once our CEO at the time took over, and there was a gap where we needed to formalize our philanthropic spending. Before it was just if something came across the desk of one of the executives, they would, maybe look, okay, let's do it. But there
Mhm.
really wasn't a lot of strategy. There wasn't a whole lot of intention, and there certainly wasn't any follow-up to that. And I certainly didn't know how to do all that. We had to kind of figure it out as we went along. But in my role, not only do I get to engage with nonprofits, especially across Central Ohio, get to understand what they all do, maybe see a more global picture because sometimes there's overlap out there. But I also was able to help formalize the process, get us automated, and set up a process so that we can consider applications for funding and then get them out to the respective requesters. Of course, we can't always say yes all the time, and we can't always give organizations as much as they want, but just trying to figure out how to thread the needle and do all of that. So I've been doing that for about 8 years or so. It kind of evolved because it wasn't really there when I started. We had to kind of build it out, but it's been very rewarding, and it's definitely helped me understand the issues out there and be better at my own philanthropy and
Mhm.
understanding that if someone doesn't step up, it probably won't get done. And if we have a chance to make a difference, we should. So, that's sort of where I come in on all that.
As a fundraising professional, like we love to hear our corporate partners talk that way. But a couple of things that come up. I love that it was sort of your personal generosity and your personal journey that sort of bled into your professional work and then created an opportunity for you to lead in this way. I think that's really interesting uh, in how that, again, that personal just continues to, well, how it will continue to influence regardless. That generosity will come through no matter what. So I'm curious, are there some notable organizations or a story or two about impact that really has struck you and resonated with you over the last 8 years or so as you really dug into this work?
Well, I've got a few that come to mind. First of all, I think about some of the organizations that um, we had a chance to meet when they were really on the ground floor. And in one case, be able to, make not large investments, but, sometimes these really small nonprofits can multiply a gift of $1,000 way more than a really large
Mhm.
organization could. But I think of some of the organizations that We had a chance to support when they were just getting started, and maybe we helped them get a little bit off the ground. I don't want to take credit for everything, but help them get off the ground enough where they were able to make their case to a much larger donor, and now they're trying to touch a stratosphere. So I can think of a couple of organizations like that where I'm really proud that we got in first, or we were having conversations early, and maybe set them up to do bigger and better things. So that's something that I'm really proud of. And then another item that I'm proud of more on a personal level, and this is my connection, maybe even to how we met at Ohio State, doing a program for them. I was a part of what was called the Minority Scholars Program at Ohio State. It's now the Moral Scholars Program. And I was so grateful to receive that scholarship and to kind of graduate really with no debt. So grateful, because I don't think I'd be eligible now. I was barely eligible back then, and I was so grateful. I mean, I just can't I'll say gratitude a million times, but what it came down to is that at first I definitely did not have the resources to say, hey, here's a check, I'm going to just make this all right. I started off with service and trying to help out and sort of earn my place as we went along. And then, eventually I got to a point where I could start contributing on my own. And when you start looking at collectively how much that accumulates over time, it starts turning out to be real money. And if I were to write a single check, instead of like the real, the smaller payments over time, you probably have your name on a plaque somewhere, or maybe there's a press release or something like that. But there's a real power to cumulative gifts that I've learned firsthand in the fact that a close friend and I have been funding a scholarship called Bucking the Trend, which tries to get us giving back to African American males at Ohio State who are just like we were. And it's we've given out over 25 scholarships at this point. And this is just from people that are cleaning out their sofas and picking out change in the, between the cracks of the seat of their car. And so everyone can be a philanthropist. You don't have to, be LeBron James or Oprah to do that. And we can all be there because those cumulative gifts really add up.
Yes, I love that cumulative giving. So I'll say it again, like every fundraiser's dream. Like we love to hear people talk about that, but it is very true, the power of that. And so also I'm really kind of interested in like your choice to support your alma mater. And so like also I also went to Ohio State University. I was also a minority scholars
Go
minority
Bucks.
scholar. So absolutely go Bucks and go, free money, free college. I love it. But there's at OSU and at other predominantly white institutions, especially when we're talking about higher ed, there is sort of these two camps that students of color sort of fall in. Either they had an amazing time and they're engaged and they remain committed to their alma mater, and remain engaged. And then there's the other camp of, I went there. I don't know if my student experience was so great and inclusive, and I got my degree, but that was it. And so within the fundraising profession, there's this conversation, especially in higher ed, like how do we engage our alumni of color, And so I'm really interested and curious about like your choice to remain engaged. Was it a choice? Like, was it an intentional choice? Um, was there any like purpose behind it, or was it just part of, this is what my family does and it is what it is?
No, it was definitely a choice in my case. And the roots of that choice they go back to gratitude. Like I said, I guess something, and I hate to admit that I have to sometimes tell my college student is that C's get degrees. So I'm living proof of that.
Yes.
And I was, maybe a better than average student in high school, certainly a very average student in college, but I was so appreciative of the scholarship. I received the MSP scholarship, which is probably about 2/3 of my tuition. And then later, when I decided to go make a move towards the insurance industry, I received another scholarship. So, and then during my time, the MSP scholarship became, I was a pioneer in that space, but the MSP scholarship became full in-state tuition.
Mhm.
And I was very, very appreciative of that at the time because, you still got your bill that you had to pay and you'd give them
Yeah.
the voucher or whatever. So I was aware of the value, but just kind of knowing that it was sort of an edge case. I mean, if I had a bad semester, my last semester in high school, we might not be having this conversation right now. I mean, I was just kind of a close call. And it really is rooted in gratitude. And once I really started to get to that point where I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to make it. I'm going to graduate and I'm going to have a chance to hopefully do something bigger or better. Really wasn't even sure what that was going to be at the time. I just, I began with service and I did that as a student. And I just thought, wow, it would be so much better if I could repay all this with interest. That was
Mhm.
sort of my
Mhm.
goal. And I, I need to go back and, I graduated the degree in finance and I need to go back and calculate it. But off the, back of a little scrap piece of paper, I believe I've repaid my scholarship plus interest maybe a couple times over. So I'm like really proud of that. And I've been wanting to challenge some of my other counterparts who had the same experience to try to do the same because at the end of the day, the experience that students have, as you describe, it was hard. We had to find our own spaces. We didn't have nearly the support that I believe that the students have now. So it wasn't easy. We had to find our own way for sure.
Mhm.
But if we're in a position where we can make that a little bit easier for the next generation, I just sort of feel like that's our duty. And that was just a goal of mine. And, to kind of actually at some point realize that was pretty gratifying. But of course, I don't want to stop. So we'll see where it
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah. So I'm just I want to call out, like, I have this vision of young Ralph as a student, that junior, senior sort of on the edge student. And then you get a scholarship recipient, and so all of that turns into a professional that has personal philanthropy and then also manages philanthropy for a major corporation in the country. And so I just want to illuminate that journey for all of us, but for fundraisers and fundraising professionals especially, and nonprofit professionals especially. Oftentimes when we're thinking about the next generation of students or the next generation of donors, we're not thinking about the young Black student on the edge, the young C student that's a scholarship recipient, and I'm calling that out because continues to be a challenge in our industry, and pushing against those norms around what does the donor look like, who's the next generation of givers, and who should we engage right now for gifts 5, 10, 20, 25 years from now. And so I just really want to call that out for all the viewers, to pause and reflect on the stories we tell ourselves and the assumptions we make
And
about.
I have to thank you for calling that out because I've never
Mhm.
thought of it that way. I'm just in the heat of the battle, just trying to
Yeah,
do the right thing. But I will say this: there were a lot of wonderful people when I was at Ohio State that certainly set a great example. They didn't specifically come and put their arm around me and said, "Hey, Ralph, in 25 years, we want you to."
right.
do this or that, but they just set an example of just what they were doing. So I sort of think about Frank Hale a little bit, and just having a chance to interact with him quite a bit. There's a number of people who I got to interact with at buildings named after them. And we got to remember that those are like real people. They're not just some,
Absolutely.
character that exists. And, just really trying to, set a higher example. And I certainly was around people that were trying to do the same thing. But, life comes at you. There's a lot of distractions. And, I have my own college students that I'm trying to pay for as
Yes.
well as trying to help someone else out. There's definitely a sacrifice involved with those kind of things. But, at the end of the day, I just think everyone's got to decide what they want to be remembered for, and what kind of person they want to be while they're here, and if they made a difference or not. So I've always had aspirations to try to, do something bigger. So I'm still at
Yes.
it. You're not done, not
Yes.
complete, but I just we all have a choice about what we want to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I'm hoping that some young person will find this and find themselves in it. In working with young people, I often encounter like they have this sense that, oh, well, you're an old person now, you're an adult now. It's always been this way for you. It's always been easy or whatever. But they don't have, it's because they're young, but they don't have the benefit of understanding, no, there's a journey there, that gets you to where you're trying to be. And we do all have a choice. And I'm like kind of reflecting and challenging myself personally, like, what could I do? What more can I do for my alma mater? Because I am not in the camp of let's give back to the alma mater. It was a challenge, but I love that sort of call to action around how can I pay back into the scholarship, into the not just the scholarship, but like you said, the professors, the administrators, the faculty and staff that were there that really helped round out the experience.
Well, and one thing that I'll say that helped me made that a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to have any disrespect or have this come off the wrong way about Ohio State, but I don't really think of it so much as me giving to the alma mater. I'm giving it to young men that were just like
Yes.
me, who, I remember what that was like, and I just want to try to give them the same opportunity I had. And, the alma mater comes into place because we had the same alma mater that we were a
Mm-hmm.
part of. But, I wouldn't be nearly as passionate about just writing a general check that just goes to, whatever. I'm
Yes.
very focused and intentional about where my giving goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious because you do have a very interesting perspective on for the nonprofit sector. Like you're not program staff, you're not fundraising staff, but yet you're engaged in the nonprofit sector. I'm curious, how would you like to see the nonprofit sector or the industry of philanthropy grow?
Well, great question. And I will say that I do have a little, it seems like I end up on the fundraising committees on a lot of different nonprofit boards I spend on. So I get to at least dabble with it. I won't call myself an expert, but I do understand the journey a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And, how would I like to see it grow? I think I'd like to maybe call out a formula that I'd like to see employed to help it grow. So I've had a pretty eclectic career in the different roles I've had. I was in some operational roles, but I also was in the training space for a number of years. And one of the things I got to do when I was a trainer was deliver sales training to our agents. And I would like to see the philanthropic community get better at selling their calls, understanding their story, being able to tell it in a way that reflects the sensibilities of the person that they're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
So and then you can even apply that to say, hey, as an African American, I know that your experience was different, so I'm not going to appeal to you with the standard pitch, but I'm going to talk to you something about, maybe talk to you about it in a way that means a little something more to you. And that's something that we used to teach in sales, you know, how to develop your prospects, you know, how that you've got to talk to, you know, for every 10 prospects you talk to, you might get 3 that actually want to
Yep.
take a deeper dive, and you might only have 1 that, you know, actually writes a check, at least on the sales side, and just understanding that there's a development process that goes on. You know, any of that hit and run stuff where it's like, hey, you know, get your money and then you're never seen again, isn't
Mhm.
that effective. So I think that I would like to just see fundraisers get more disciplined and maybe adopt some of the higher level sales techniques so that they can sell their organization. Another thing that I've had a chance to do both in my regular job, but also on a volunteer level, is do grant reviews and review requests for funding, not only the ones that come to our company, but for some other organizations. In fact, in one case where, you know, some of the grants were 6 figures, and I was really astounded at how poorly some of the stories were told. You know, I might know a little bit more about the organization due to personal involvement, but just not being able to explain what that value proposition is. And I think
Yeah.
that if we can collectively get better at that, then there will be growth. But as you know, there's a lot of turnover. You know, fundraisers turn over. Some of the fundraisers I know have been in, you know, 4 or 5 different jobs in the time that I've been in just my one job.
Mhm.
Um, it's very tough. You know, once you go around and you know, sort of close all of the people in your circle, then, you know, well, hey, how can we grow? It gets a little hard to do that. Maybe there's cutbacks, so your regular funders might not be able to do as much, and it's more advantageous to move on. So we've got to figure all those things out. But I think that just kind of adapting a very structured and professional, you know, storytelling and sales approach to this might be the key to growth.
Yeah. You just made an amazing case for prospect development. So thank you for that commercial. But a couple of things that that kind of stand out to me is this idea that fundraising is sales, because we don't pitch it that way within our industry. We don't, the job postings don't mention sales. Like it's not, there isn't a posting for a sales representative when it comes to fundraising, but it absolutely is a sales job. I have a video. I think I've maybe by the time this is released, that video will have been released as well. But a video that's all about, guess what, fundraisers, you have a sales job, because they don't seem to understand that until they are in the role and they're doing the work. And then I hear it on the other side of, this feels like a salesperson. I'm like, that's what you are. That's exactly what it is. The sales and the storytelling is so important. We talk about that so often in fundraising. So I love that you called that out. And then that sort of that ratio, that 10 prospects is what gets you to that one gift, and so then you need to be strategic about who those prospects are, to make sure that your success rate is higher and that you do get closer to that 1 to 3 closed sales or closed gifts, as it were.
Yeah, when there's 10 at the top and 1 on the bottom, if you you know, draw a shape, it looks like a triangle. You turn it upside
Yes,
down, it looks like a funnel. And we used to
yes,
call it filling the funnel.
yes,
And the other thing about filling the funnel is that you can't be filling it, you know, it's better to hear a no and then quickly move on to the
yes,
next, but it's also better to, you know, fill that with qualified prospects so that you can
yes,
you know, make sure you have a higher closing rate at the end. But, you know, getting back to that, you know, most nonprofits just don't have the resources to send people to get that more advanced training. Um, I think a lot of people who are nonprofit leaders are what I would call social warriors. They're very
mhm,
dialed into a cause. They're going to lay it all out on the line to do a lot of those things, but they might not have any experience. That's
Yeah.
what I hope I might bring to some of these, is just bringing some of that other experience to the table. And I recognize that a lot of them don't. Most of the people that are coming into a financial development role, they don't get kind of that training and support, and they're just kind of thrown out there, and they do the best they can. But at the end of the day, we probably don't set up people to succeed collectively as we should.
Yeah. Do you think there's an opportunity for the nonprofit sector and the corporate sector to come together to sort of advance that training and provide that sort of level set foundational instruction?
There might be. I think it depends on the industry. I might be a little bit of a unicorn in the respect that I've had a lot of other roles, so I just happen to have that piece in my journey. But if I'm not mistaken, and I don't remember what the curriculum is, the Columbus Foundation had a program for fundraisers because they were concerned about the turnover that was happening, and how it's hard to really get traction if you're putting a new person in there every year and a half, every 2 years. And I know that they had a program, although I don't know the curriculum, but I know that there have been some efforts to do that. But I think that, that sort of capacity development is something that we should be willing to support, as funders, and especially if it's purposeful and there's a intentional outcome that we desire. So I think there could be an opportunity there, whether it be corporately or with some of the larger foundations that kind of reach everyone.
And there's one last thing that we haven't covered, but I would love to touch on just a bit. And that's the idea of sort of centering your experience with the United Way and the Key Club, which I know there have been some changes in the Key Club, I think has been dismantled. But I still want to get into like the power of like affinity-based giving. And if you could share just kind of really quickly what the Key Club is, what the membership was about, and some of the impact that the Key Club had here in Central Ohio.
Absolutely. So we should talk about this in past tense because it's not really around anymore. But the Key Club was a United Way affinity group for African Americans who made a certain minimum amount of donation or above. I just happened, because our company had such a large, robust United Way campaign, that sort of put me on the front row to kind of get to know the folks over there and form relationships to a point where I was invited to be part of that group, and eventually got to be a co-chair. And I've got to really give them credit for really kind of getting me dialed into what philanthropy is all about, and even understanding what it means in our community specifically. But I think that some of the pieces that come into play with that now, by and large, throughout my time doing that, we were not directing funding to a particular place, although a lot of the United Way funding was going to causes that I think were in alignment with what an African American donor would be interested in. But I think that what it really did for us, both individually and maybe collectively, number one, it allowed us to connect with people like ourselves. So the folks that were part of that steering committee with me, we're still friends. I mean, we I think that that it sort of broke up, right as the pandemic was starting. So that's a good, 3+ years out. And then you take the time, before that. So you're going back 7 or 8 years, and everyone that was a part of that, we still talk. We're close. We're friends. And I think that it always helps to have a community of like-minded people to help you get enthusiastic. If you're the only one and you're kind of an outlier, and the people aren't supporting you, or they think you're crazy or something, you don't move. But when you're around people that have kind of a similar mindset, that are, going out to visit nonprofit agencies to
Mhm.
understand what they do, and not just as a person that maybe that works in the field where you're having to do it, but doing it on your own.
Yeah.
When you are engaging other donors, which we did, and just really understanding that, hey, we're just part of a larger process to make big things happen. It's energizing, and that
Yes.
that was something that we were able to kind of do during our time. And of course, things change, and I know that as the pandemic hit, things sort of moved on to another way. But one thing about relationships is that they last longer than institutions, I guess. So
Yes, 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 absolutely. And I love that you call that out, because there's power in that relationship, which to me is the residual return, and so there was an investment by the institution to create this affinity group, and it had a tremendous impact for a good, it has good history. I don't know exactly how long Key Club was around. Do you know offhand?
I came in maybe in the last third of the
Okay,
history, but
okay,
I don't know exactly. I know that I was eligible to be a part of Key Club maybe right from the inception. But as we speak today, today is my twins' birthday, so I had
okay.
twins, and then a daughter. Having three kids under five. When that was really in its heyday, I could barely get out of the house, so I wasn't
Yes.
engaged. I was just doing it, more of a payroll deduction, but I wasn't able to get engaged with it until I got a little more stability on the home
Yeah.
front. So,
So it's
so
like a
I want to
30
say
year.
I'm sorry.
Okay, was it like a 30-year history?
I don't know. I want to say, I think Janet Jackson was really the key person with
Hmm.
that. So it would track with her tenure, as I
Yeah.
remember. And I don't want to say it wrong, but I do know her and think the world of
Yeah.
her. And I believe that it kind of tracked with her tenure.
Hmm. But it really speaks to the power of affinity groups, the power of giving circles, and a call to action for institutions to invest in creating these circles. And I've often, having been in fundraising my entire career, have often wanted to see different organizations, different nonprofits sort of come together to build this sort of, I don't know, universal giving circle. And so the Key Club, for example, belonged to United Way. And say for the university may have its own giving circle for donors of color, and other institutions will do the same. But there's some value in the nonprofit sector in general coming together, especially here in Central Ohio. Like, we're going to create an affinity, or not even create, we're going to support some of the existing giving circles and intentionally engage them. Those giving circles that are comprised of people of color, different populations. I think it's really important, and I love that. I appreciate your sharing your story about that.
Thank you. And I will say that there are some organizations that have auxiliaries. I know the
Hmm.
Urban League has the Columbus Urban League Young Professionals, which
Hmm.
I had a chance to work with extremely closely when I was a board member there. And that's one of those things that can set up someone for lifetime giving. That group raised quite a bit of money
Hmm.
on their own. I mean, significant amount of money, just through what they did. I know other organizations have young professional groups. It takes a little bit of investment and commitment for
Yeah.
nonprofits to stay with that long enough to make sure it catches fire and takes hold, and also to transition between. Usually something like that starts with a dynamic group of leaders, and then when they
Yeah.
move on, it kind of diminishes as time goes on. So it takes a lot of commitment on the side of the nonprofit to really make that happen. But I think that I've learned, especially at this phase in my life, whether it be philanthropy or for other things that take commitment, that being part of a community is really the key for keeping it sustainable and successful.
Absolutely. I just had like this vision of, I used to be a YP many, many, many moons ago, here at Columbus YP, and really enjoyed that experience and talk about relationships, still connected
Me
to those
too.
individuals. But I just like had this vision of like being at the Urban League and being part of some sort of leadership training for the young professional members, because they come in and they have some level of leadership, or at least are definitely interested in growing their leadership experience, but then coupling that very intentionally with the philanthropy, and the nonprofit insights from that sector, whether or not they themselves are in the nonprofit sector. Oftentimes, they come in from the corporate sector, as it relates to YP members. And so, just this very intentional marrying of like, here's your service and we appreciate it, but we're also going to really prepare you for community service, not just here at the league, but beyond. And part of that definitely includes being engaged in philanthropy as a board member, as an advocate, as a donor, as a major gift donor, as a name donor, all of those different levels.
Well, I can tell you that my association with that group, they would never let me in because I was too old. I
Yes, I'm
tried
too
to get them
old
to
now.
change the rules, and they just wouldn't bend on that. There
Yes.
wasn't such an opportunity when I was eligible, but that's the best thing I ever did in my life, in my career. I can
Mhm.
say that with a lot of confidence because the people that I work with are dear, dear close friends. I talk to someone in that group at least once or twice a week.
Mhm.
Many of those members have gone on to, in some cases, lead. I can think of a couple that are leading or led
Yeah.
nonprofits and other large things. And you have to really support that desire, or you got to give people an opportunity to see it and support it
Yeah.
early on. You have to nurture it. You just can't neglect people for years and years and then just throw them into something. They probably will
Yeah.
find a way to mess it up, but if you nurture it, there's some really wonderful outcomes that are possible, and we can kind of build that mindset that you know this didn't happen all by itself.
Yeah.
We had to make it happen.
Yeah. And then that gets back into like your storytelling. Are you telling your impact story in the relationships? Are you building relationships? Are you proactively engaging your constituents, whether or not they're your alumni, your neighbors, your corporate partners, etc. So I love that. I love all that you represent about.
Thank you. Well, and I appreciate all. I've never really thought. I just do what I think I should be doing.
Absolutely.
And in some cases, there's been maybe some little doses of inspiration here or there, but by and large, it's kind of been accidental. So I
Mhm.
appreciate you, giving me this kind of enthusiasm to just, really keep at it, because sometimes I wonder what I got myself into.
So I would love to close on. I'm curious about like you shared, about the type of um like you support scholarships. I get that. I hear that. And I think you probably are involved in faith-based giving. I hear that. And so I'm curious about your own personal vision for your philanthropic legacy. Like, what would you like to leave behind? What would you like your story as a donor to be?
Wow. I'll have to think about that one for a second. That's a big question,
I'm
but
feeling
I think I have
reflective
an
this
answer
week.
for it. No, I actually do think about it. I guess as you get older, you have to start thinking about
Absolutely.
stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So there's a couple of, if I had personal pillars,
Mhm.
education, I'd like to figure out a way to make sure that the support for education continues after I'm gone. So, I'm starting to, think about, plan giving and that sort of thing and what that might look like. And, also organize that with my kids, so,
Yes.
so everyone's happy with whatever happens. But, I think that one of the things that we can do individually, but also collectively, is understand that, hey, if you can build up a certain amount of funds, that interest payment, the interest that's earned off of that can support a cause forever. That's what an endowment is. So
Mhm.
I've certainly have thought about, how that might look, and what kind of things. So between education, pretty passionate about social justice as well. I think those two are related. We have to kick open the doors of opportunity
Mhm.
because they're not just going to be open for us more
Yeah.
often than not. So we've got to figure out how to do that. So that's been something that's been on my mind. Um, I'm also on the board of the Lincoln Theater, and I'm starting to have a much better appreciation for the arts,
Yes.
and that's never been a strong suit of mine at all. But just thinking, how can you create something that just keeps going, after we're not able to contribute to it or after we're dead, really,
Mhm.
for, just cutting to the chase.
Yes.
So, my legacy is just to, I guess, try to build something that's going to last longer than me. So I don't know exactly. I hope I got a lot of time to think about that, but
Yes.
that it's on my mind. What can I do that will last longer than me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like we have to like create some fundraising school and take it on the road.
Yeah.
I'll teach the
Again, it's
science and you teach the sales and the heart of it.
well, you just let me know. I'll come and do that. And let me just say that if nothing else, I think that I would just want to make sure people understand that that cumulative gift is just as big as that big time shot in the arm.
Yep.
If you give, $25 a month, what does that add up to? $300 a year.
Yeah. That sounds about right. Yeah.
So $300 a year times 10 years, it's
Yeah.
3,000.
Hmm.
If you do that for the length of a working career, that's 10,000. A lot of
Yeah.
people think, wow, you gave $10,000 or something. And of course, you might find the capacity to do even more.
Hmm.
I probably spend more than that on coffee and other frivolous things. So it's just a matter
Yes.
of choosing what your priorities are. But even if you don't have the $1 million plus contract, or you're not an
Yep.
athlete or entertainer or at the very top of your organization, I guess I would just want to make sure people realize that those small gifts add up too, and collectively we can make a bigger impact than some of those big time folks that we normally
Yeah.
think of as philanthropists.
Yeah. So I'm always thinking about the operation side of things. I'm like, we should have like our industry needs to implement like retroactive naming opportunities because you mentioned it a couple times, sort of indirectly, like I've given enough to have my name on something, but we don't typically do that in our industry. It's more of we're having this campaign and we need some new money in the door and here write a new big check and then you'll get your name on something. But I think there's an opportunity for us to pause within the industry and be reflective and intentional about how do we steward our long-term cumulative gift donors. And there is an opportunity to be more appreciative and extend another level of acknowledgement, I think, to them. So just a little bit of a soapbox there.
I love it. We got to make it happen.
Yes, we're gonna campaign and get your name on something like retroactively.
Besides a tombstone, I hope,
Exactly,
we got to figure
exactly.
that out.
Exactly. Ralph, I thank you so much. I have enjoyed our conversation again. I think this is our third or fourth time, or third time.
And hopefully
It's
not the last, right?
absolutely, absolutely. There's so much alignment, and I'm sure that I'm going to reach out in another month or so and revisit this whole idea I have about like philanthropy decoded. Um, this intentional engagement and outreach to donors and people of color to really help them understand the power of philanthropy. And like, no, you are a philanthropist, the P word, you are that. And here's this other piece, especially the advocacy and the leadership that goes along with it. So
Well,
I
Regina, I
appreciate your
have to
time.
thank you for inviting me. I feel really, really honored to be able to share this time with you, and appreciate you being able to put into context things that I never really gave that much thought to prior to getting to know you and talk to you. But I do realize that if we can get more people on board, even if it doesn't seem like a big deal, it
Mhm.
definitely adds up. And I just really want to thank you for the impact that you make in our community. And we're going to make it better. We're going to make it better than what we found it. And that's the ultimate
Yes,
goal.
yes. Thank you so much, Ralph. I have incredible gratitude for you today, and appreciate your time and appreciate you sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you.